What is going on, everybody? Today we are talking about the 5 biggest risers and the 5 biggest losers from the Senior Bowl. In my opinion, it is the most important game for any of these prospects coming out of the draft, because for the first time we see these guys going up against some of the best competition around college football. Let's jump into it with the first player on our list, a guy who rose, in my opinion, more than anyone else. That is McClendon Curtis out of Chattanooga. If you guys don't know, Chattanooga has produced a very, very good offensive lineman last year. And while I was watching that offensive lineman, that is Cole Strange, drafted it in the first round to the New England Patriots. While watching that guy, I noticed this 6'5", 331-pound beast. And that beast is McClendon Curtis. The guy's massive. Very, very good football player, in my opinion. We're not going to watch clips of every single guys, but this guy, you got to watch the clips, man. Very, very, very explosive. Great block here. It's a simple out block on the zone run. It's a split zone concept. And just look at the movement he's creating here on this defensive lineman. This guy's going to be a bully at the next level, in my opinion. And don't think he's only a guy that is a bully. Watch this reach block from him to the one technique defensive lineman. Keep in mind, the defensive lineman is shaded to the left. So this is a much harder block as opposed to if this guy was shaded to the right of that center. And watch him cut this guy off. Look at him overtake and look at him turn his hips on that. That block right there is a NFL level block. In fact, a lot of NFL guys could not make that block. And here he is, McClendon Curtis, making a fantastic block. In my opinion, this guy right here is going to be a long-term starter in the NFL. Big, explosive, great power at the point of attack, but he's smart, right? And oftentimes I say this, the smartest offensive linemen are going to be the best offensive linemen. And McClendon Curtis is one of the smartest offensive linemen. Let's jump forward to the second guy that I think rose a lot. That was quarterback. And this quarterback, most people say, is the best quarterback at the Senior Bowl. That is Jake Haener out of Fresno State. In my opinion, coming into the Senior Bowl, Haener was probably a 4th to 6th round prospect, somewhere in between there. More of a long-term developmental piece. But coming to the Senior Bowl, the guy dominated. I wouldn't be surprised if a team takes him in the 2nd round at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up going ahead of some of the other guys. Now, obviously, his size is a concern. He's only 6 feet tall, 208 pounds. But the guy was a beast. And he ended up getting Player of the Week, voted on, I should say, Player of the Week by the defensive backs. Keeping in mind, those guys know which quarterbacks were on fire. And he was one of those quarterbacks. The guy's been ripping it off all Senior Bowl. I remember watching some of these practices. A right tackle would lose, and this guy would spin out of there, run to his right, and hit a guy 15 yards downfield. This guy was making all the things you want to see from a quarterback. I oftentimes say the quarterback position has started to change a little bit. And in my opinion, one of the ways it's changing is quarterbacks are asked to get out of the pocket more often. They're asked to make plays, right? When that initial read isn't there, right? When a seal concept's called and the defense is in a cover 2 and you can't hit that guy 15 yards on an out because there's an underneath defender, how do you react, right? Do you throw the ball away? Do you check it down, which is what quarterbacks of the past were asked to do? Or do you do what Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes do, which is roll to the right, force that defender to have to step up and then throw the football, right? Do you make those extra plays to benefit your team? And Jake Haener, in my opinion, does that. The Fresno State quarterback, don't be surprised if he ends up going in the 2nd round. Don't be surprised if he slips into the 1st round, the end of the 1st round, right? A team that wants a quarterback for long-term development, don't be surprised. Now, I don't think he's going to go in the 1st round, but never say never. I think the guy looked really, really good. With that being said, jumping forward into the next player that really shined, Tyjae Spears out of Tulane. The running back from day one, and I'm not understating this. From day one, rep 1, the guy just started bursting onto the scene. The guy was ripping it. 15 yards, 30 yards, touchdown runs over and over and over again, and it was very clear this guy is it. He was the talk of the Senior Bowl. I talked to a couple of scouts that were at the Senior Bowl, and they told me that this guy, maybe more than anyone else, rose his stock. He was regarded to as a 6th or 7th round pick before the Senior Bowl, and at this point, don't be surprised if he's the 2nd running back taken, maybe the 3rd right after Bijan Robinson. The guy is a superstar player. We're going to watch this one clip that kind of got trending on social media. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it just looks cool the way he was able to beat the linebacker. Very nice route. Some people are saying that, by the time he finishes this route, the quarterback's going to get killed. So, it's not that big of a deal. But regardless, it's a nice route to be able to break past the linebacker. Is it a realistic route in the NFL? Probably not. But regardless of the route, he still needs to obviously continue to develop in terms of running routes. He needs to continue to develop in terms of pass pro. That's going to be a big part of if he'll be a 3-down player in the NFL. But the guy has the explosive ability to be an in-between the tackler and to be able to hit those outside zone runs, right? So, in my opinion, Tyjae Spears, one of the best running backs in this draft class. I think that's very, very clear. Massive riser. The final two guys that rose, in my opinion, these were the two best guys at the Senior Bowl, and it was very clear, at least in my opinion. The first guy is going to be Will McDonald, Iowa State. I want to be honest with you guys. Coming into the Senior Bowl, the guy that I thought would absolutely crush people was Darnell Wright. And he did crush people. He crushed most people on most reps, but the one guy that gave him trouble was Will McDonald. He couldn't block Will McDonald. And I did not realize how great of a football player this guy was because I didn't watch a lot of his tape. I watched one game. And in that one game, he looked good. But he was a guy that I was going to come back to and grade a little bit later on. And at the Senior Bowl, I was shocked with how great this guy is. Crazy great pass rush technique. His hands are through the roof. The guy's very, very good when it comes to his pass rush technique. More than just his pass rush technique, he's explosive. He has good bend. He knows how to hit the outside move and set up the inside move on the very next play. The guy, in my opinion, just crushed the Senior Bowl, and I would not be surprised if he's a top 15 pick. Let me back up here. Do not be surprised if Will McDonald is the second defensive end / edge player taken in this class, and he's a top 6 or 7 pick. Don't be surprised if he ends up going right after Will Anderson out of Alabama prior to the Texas Tech defensive end Tyree Wilson, who a lot of people right now have projected as the second defensive end on the board. Don't be surprised if Will McDonald has overtaken him. Tyree Wilson was supposed to be at the Senior Bowl, ended up not fully committing. He obviously pulled out. Will McDonald showed up, and he dominated the Senior Bowl. And in my opinion, I'm going to put Will McDonald ahead of Tyree Wilson in my rankings, specifically because he has the hands and the pass rush technique to be a great football player at the next level. Again, Will McDonald is a superstar player, and I think he's going to be a top 5 to 7 player drafted. Jumping into the other player, the guy that Will McDonald actually beat up on, and the only guy that really was able to beat him was Darnell Wright. I think Darnell Wright is a massive riser. One of the concerns that people had with Darnell Wright is how would he do once he gets into it and is taking on some of the top competition. He went up against guys like Andre Carter and Ollie Gay and Will McDonald. And don't get me wrong, he still was able to block McDonald. McDonald obviously had a lot of good reps against him. But against all the other guys, he pretty much shut all of them down. And in my opinion, he is a massive riser. In my opinion, if you want an offensive tackle that you can develop into a top 5 offensive tackle in the NFL, Darnell Wright is that guy. Wright obviously played right tackle in college, but he also has experience at left tackle. Last year, prior to his final year at Tennessee, he played left tackle, so he can definitely play both. I will say he looks better at right tackle than he does at left tackle. And at Senior Bowl practice, he only played right tackle. He did not play left tackle at all, which is kind of interesting because so many of these guys are kind of going back and forth all over the place. But Darnell Wright, in my opinion, is the number 1 offensive tackle in this class. I actually stated that before the Senior Bowl, and I'm going to stick with it. I know some people like Broderick Jones, some people like Paris Johnson, but watching those guys tape, they're just not there today. And those guys may be great in the future, but there's a lot that they have to develop. Peter Skronsky, in my opinion, isn't long enough. I'm going to put him as a guard. I will not take him if I really need an offensive tackle, right? If I need a tackle and a guard, then I may take Peter Skronsky to see how he fits at tackle, then eventually move him to guard. The same way the Bears did with Tevin Jenkins, right? You take him at tackle. If he doesn't work out, you put him to guard. That's what they did. He's a great guard in the league. But if I need a true offensive tackle, Darnell Wright is the guy I get. I think he's just there with his pass blocking abilities. In fact, I did a film breakdown of his on my second YouTube channel. I'll link that in the comments below if you guys want to go check it out. Those are the 5 risers that I have: McClendon Curtis, Jake Haener, Tyjae Spears, Darnell Wright, and Will McDonald. 5 risers. Now, there are some honorable mentions. We'll get to that at the end of this video. Let's go over some of the fallers, the 5 guys that I think really fell. Starting with the first guy, Andre Carter, Army defensive end, 6'6", massive size, massive frame. He just didn't have the strength behind his pass rush. He didn't have the pass rush technique. Now, of course, being at Army, he doesn't play against a lot of the top tackles. And at the Senior Bowl, he played against the top tackles, and it just didn't look good on tape. In my opinion, he just didn't have the pass rush technique. In my opinion, I don't see him as a first-round prospect or even a top 15 prospect in the second round. So for me, he went from a fringe first-round pick to falling out of the top 45 picks. Now, he can develop, right? Big frame, great motor, and I think that's the one thing he has really going for him, is he does not give up on plays. And he kind of reminds you of Matt Crosby in that aspect, that he has a crazy great motor, but again, he doesn't have the pass rush technique, the pass rush tools. Yes, you can develop that, but how much do guys really develop, right? Guys in the NFL today that don't have the hands, right? Rookies to where they're at today, a lot of them don't really develop. And for me, if I'm taking a first round guy or a top 15 to 16 guy in the second round, they have to have pass rush technique. Compare a guy like Will McDonald to Andre Carter. One guy's much better than the other guy. So for me, Andre Carter really took a massive step back. He has to get stronger. He has to develop a little bit more in his pass rush technique. To me, it was just too inconsistent. The second guy that fell, in my opinion, is Jaren Hall, quarterback of BYU. Some people had this guy going in the second round. Some people had him as like quarterback 5 or 6 in this class. Keep in mind, we'll get about 4 to 5 quarterbacks going in the first round. Jaren Hall was ranked as a second round quarterback. Too inconsistent, in my opinion. Watching his tape, watching him go through his reads, he just didn't look good. You know, those one play specifically where a cover 2 was called and they ran a seal concept to the right? So he basically had a guy running it out, and you don't throw a seal on a cover 2 because the corner can pick it off. And he throws it, and it's those type of decisions, right? Another play I was looking at, it looked like it was man-to-man coverage, and instead of taking his alert, he ends up getting sacked, right? Because the defense blitzed. So for me, it's those type of decisions. Throw it, be consistent. His ball placement was really bad. There are a couple of plays where he like overthrew guys, underthrew guys. Pocket awareness wasn't all that great. For me, he really fell. Now, do keep in mind, at least in my opinion, I think there'll be like 7 quarterbacks that go in the top 2 rounds, and then there'll be a lot of quarterbacks that go in like round 5, 6, and 7. And I think Jaren Hall has went from a second round prospect down towards like the 5th or 6th round. I think long term maybe he can develop, but to me he just didn't look that good. And I do understand that for quarterbacks, the Senior Bowl doesn't really benefit them, or I shouldn't say it doesn't benefit them. It could make them look worse because it's like a whole new scheme, a whole new system. Definitely makes it hard for those guys that they don't really know the receivers there. So for me, Jaren Hall was a guy that fell. The third guy that for me fell was linebacker Demarvion Overshown. He's a guy that I really like, right? Watching his tape, the guy was very good against the run. He made some plays in pass coverage. He just didn't look that quick going up against some of these guys, right? There were a couple of times where I saw guys cutting him off. I saw guys being able to angle him out of plays. And his frame, 6'2", massive frame, 6'2", 220. He just didn't play with his hands. He didn't play with that big frame. For me, very inconsistent getting off blocks, right? Getting around blocks, getting off blocks, being able to avoid the garbage that kind of piles up within a play. He just didn't look good for me. Now, obviously, when I say that, do keep in mind, some people said he was the best linebacker in this class. Some people had a first-round grade, a late first-round grade on this guy, and I just don't see that. For me, he's a third-round prospect. Of course, we'll kind of see as more tape becomes available. I don't have a lot of tape of him right now. Only have 2 games, so as more tape comes around, we'll reevaluate that as the process here continues. For me, very inconsistent getting off his blocks. Has to get stronger, right? Has to really grow into that 6'2" frame. The final guy that for me, or actually the final 2 guys for me that kind of underperformed. Keep in mind, these are guys that I think had a lot of upside, right? One is going to be Tennessee's Byron Young, 6'2", 248 defensive end. For me, he's a guy that I really, really liked, right? He's a guy that I thought in college did a lot of really good things. He was a guy some people were saying would be a top 45 pick. He just didn't flash the way that I thought he would flash. He didn't do some of the things that I expect out of a defensive end. He didn't show the pass rush technique. So for me, that was the biggest thing that kind of had me have him fall just a little bit. And it's not that he's a bad football player. He just didn't flash the way I expected him to flash. And I don't think that's because he played against better competition. I think it's just the type of player he is. Maybe he needs to continue to develop. Again, only 6'2" as a defensive end. So he is on the shorter side, right, for defensive ends. Not a major deal. The last guy that fell for me, this one was interesting, right? Because Blake Freeland of BYU is a 6'7", 312-pound offensive tackle. And he was getting bullied out there. Like, he didn't look quick. He didn't look explosive. And this is generally the thing with these taller, skinnier offensive tackles is they're quick, they're fast, have good feet. Blake Freeland has a lot of developing to do. Now, the crazy thing is because of his height, he may still go in the top 64 picks. I would not take him, but there's a team out there that's going to think they can develop him. For me, just too inconsistent. He was the one guy that I think constantly got beat by a lot of these defensive ends. Will McDonald beat him. I even saw Brian Young beat him a couple times. So I think for me, when I look at a guy like Blake Freeland, I would have liked to see more from him. He wasn't good with his reach blocks. He wasn't good with his backside seals. He didn't show any sort of strength that I would expect to see out of him. And I understand he's 6'7", so in terms of leverage, he has, he's already like 5 inches taller than most defensive tackles. So it does make it hard for him, right, from that standpoint. But you got to still be able to dominate the Senior Bowl, right? At the end of the day, these are still college players. Yeah, they're probably top college players. A lot of them are. But they're still college players, and you still got to dominate. For me, Blake Freeland was a bottom 5 overall offensive lineman. And there are other guys that, were worse than him, but those are guys I didn't have a lot of expectations for. At BYU, Freeland actually looked good, right? He actually did a great job in pass pro. And for me, at the Senior Bowl, a lot of the time I saw him like grabbing air, right? Not doing a good job. So those are the 5 fallers: Andre Carter, Jaren Hall, Demarvion Overshown, Byron Young, and Blake Freeland. 5 fallers. We got the 5 risers at the beginning. There are some guys that I want to just give an honorable mention to. For me, 2 guys specifically that weren't risers were OCyrus, Torrence, and John Michael Schmitz. For me, the reason why they weren't risers is because they're already the 2 best guys at their position, right? OCyrus Torrence is the best guard in the NFL draft. John Micheal Schmitz is the best center in the NFL draft. And they basically just proved it, right? Both guys are going to be really, really good football players. Don't be surprised if both guys are first-round picks. If a team needs a center, Schmitz is the first center off the board. If a team needs a guard, Torrence is the first guard off the board. So don't be surprised if those 2 guys are the first guys taken at their respective position. Arguably better than guys like Darnell, Wright, and Will McDonald today at their position. But again, they're not risers because they're already at the top of the list. One guy that really rose for me was a guy that was not even on the radar. In fact, he wasn't even invited to the Senior Bowl until he dominated the lower level college bowl, right? That is Marte Mapu at a Sac State. Sac State, I want you guys to think about this. I had the decision to go to Sac State. It's crazy to think this because Sac State doesn't produce NFL players. And yet, Marte Mapu, linebacker at Sac State, may be one of the best linebackers in this class. Yeah, the linebacker class isn't very strong, but the guy flashed, especially in coverage. He's quick, explosive. The guy, in my opinion, has all the tools that you need. Now, obviously, do keep in mind, there's tape that will get of Sac State to be able to watch him a little bit more. In my opinion, the Senior Bowl has a lot of reps that don't really mean a whole lot, right? There are not a lot of actual situations where you're putting a guy in a certain spot. But he looked really, really, really good. And in my opinion, he's a guy that climbed the draft boards a lot because before the Senior Bowl, he wasn't even going to get drafted. He would not have even gotten, I shouldn't say he wouldn't have gotten looked at, but he would not have gotten drafted. He would have probably been a guy to go to a practice squad or undrafted free agent, have an opportunity at the practice squad. But for me now, this guy's going to get drafted. He's a top 4-round pick, in my opinion. Don't be surprised if he continues to climb the board. The guy looked really explosive. Another guy that looked good was Isaiah Land out of Florida A&M, linebacker. Let me take that back. He was an edge player at Florida A&M, 27 sacks over the last 2 years. But they actually moved him to inside linebacker. And some people say he didn't look as comfortable, which is true. First time he's playing inside linebacker. But the guy has some unique upside. 6'3", 226 pounds. Massive frame. He did not look great, in my opinion. But the versatility is interesting. So I just want to give him an honorable mention. 27 sacks over the last 2 years. Obviously, he was at Florida A&M. They don't produce a whole lot of NFL players. But most recently, right, they have produced some guys to make it into the NFL. Very interesting prospect, if you guys ask me. Those are the guys right there. I want to know if you guys followed the Senior Bowl, who it was that you guys felt had a good Senior Bowl. Let me know in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.